Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mike. I'm with the BobCAD training department. Some of you have worked with me before or heard my videos. Today, we're going to be covering the advantages of using Wire EDM program with BobCAD. So Wire is one of the easiest tool paths to put on a part. Now, it doesn't make it the easiest kind of machines or anything by any means, but we only have 6 tool paths. 3 of them are for 2-axis, 3 of them are for 4-axis. So what I have on the screen here is a part that I've had for a long time. Some of you guys may have seen it in the past. It's one of my favorite parts because it lets me kind of run through a bunch of different scenarios for Wire EDM. So to start off, I've got 2 things created so far, and that's it. I have my part, and in this part, we have some 4-axis entities. We have some 2-axis entities. We have some morphing to different shapes kind of 4-axis entities. I haven't done anything with the geometry for that yet, but I'm going to go over here and turn off the CAD. The other thing that I have created so far is my stock. Now, you can make this into a solid just by going to Create 3D and doing like an extrude curve. This is a very simple piece of stock. I can actually pick this whole part and then just make it 3 inches tall. And that could be my stock. When we go to pick stock, we could either use rectangular stock, we can use wireframe stock, or we can use a solid stock. I'm going to go with wireframe or solid on this because I have holes punched in this already where I went in and lined up where I would put some holes. So this stock represents the holes. It gives me a good place to start all of my tool paths from, and it just helps to have those ones. Now, if you don't add the holes in, but you know where they're going to be positioned, that's fine too. You just won't see the hole inside the stock. I'm going to keep it as wireframe because I don't see a lot of people using the wireframe stock too often, and it's a really good option. So what we have is our part, and right there again, stock. And so to get into the actual tool pathing, or prior to getting into the tool pathing, especially if you know there's going to be 4-axis geometry, one of the best things to do is get that geometry and put it on separate layers. That's what I usually do. So what I'm going to do is over here, I've already created the layers just by right-clicking and adding new layers. I'm going to put my check mark on top wireframe, and I'm going to turn off the stock for right now. Now, when you do a 4-axis cut, you actually don't need all your geometry to actually be separate. It's a lot easier to work on in my eyes, but you can actually have everything on the same Z level. So if I go to Create 2D here, I can go right here to Extract Edges. And then there's this option in here called Project to Z Plane. So we're not going to keep this finish, but what you could do is you could technically take both planes, the top and the bottom. We can check project to the Z plane and set a Z plane. I'm going to leave it at 0, and then I can hit OK. And if I go and turn off my CAD layer, I have all of the geometry for those 4-axis features. Now, the thing with this is when we do our 4th axis, we know the height of the part based off of what we set up when we made our stock, or when we make our stock. We haven't done it yet. So we know how tall the part is. So we can figure out the tapers that are needed to cut the 4th axis just based off of the geometry. So when we go into 4-axis, it'll tell you to pick the top shape, and it'll tell you pick the bottom shape. As long as I pick the correct top and the correct bottom shape, even if it's on the same flat plane, you can still use it. I don't get too many drawings like this, but it is possible to do it this way. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hit undo. I'm going to turn my stock back on. Now this time when I do it, I'm going to extract my edges, but I'm not going to project to a Z plane. I'm going to leave that right at 0. I'm going to pick the top of the part just like that, and then we're going to hit OK. Now I can go over to my layers. I'm going to turn on my bottom wireframe layer and then hit my check mark to make that one active. And then I'm going to flip the part, pick the bottom surface, and then hit OK. And then cancel out. Now that's the way I would prefer to do 4-axis, only because it really gives me a good separation between the top and the bottom. If I come in here and I turn off my CAD layer now, I'm left with this. So it becomes a lot easier to see really what's a 4th axis shape, because some of these aren't. This right here, this star shape here, let me turn the solid on. This shape is only a land and a taper. Same with this guy here. The middle shape there is a 4-axis. We have 2 different shapes. This is 4-axis. I believe that's 4th axis. That's 4-axis. That's 4-axis. That's a little 2-axis. This can be 4-axis. And then I believe this is also 4-axis over here. So a lot of 4-axis in this part. But we're going to treat everything kind of independently anyway, so it shouldn't be a problem. And you could do, you could do a standard taper with a 4-axis. You just have to have both shapes instead of just letting the wire do it itself. Now, you couldn't do a land and a taper doing 4th axis because it's going to have whatever the shape difference is. It needs to know to do a straight cut and a taper cut. And the regular feature, the 2-axis feature, will do that. So the geometry, once again, you're just going to extract the edges and kind of leave it where it is. All right, we'll talk more about getting some other edges that we may need later on. So I'm going to start by just leaving the CAD model on. I'm going to go over here to my CAM tree. And actually, I didn't need the CAD model on. We're going to right-click on CAM defaults, and we're going to say New Job. In here, we can choose Wire EDM. I'm going to use this Sodic Mark 21. You'd pick your machine. Honestly, the most important part of this entire process is trying to get the correct machine. Make sure you got the right machine that loads up in here, and then your post processor. As any of you guys who have done anything with Wire EDM, if it doesn't match one of these exact defaults that we have, there's sometimes some work that has to be put in for getting your post done and getting everything right. But I'm going to go here and just go to the stock wizard. Now, the first thing it's going to ask me about is my workpiece. The workpiece is a solid model that represents the final finished part. So I'm going to go ahead and pick my workpiece just by picking this right here and then hitting the next button. Make sure you don't accidentally hit OK because it'll bring you right back in to the CAM tree. So we're just going to hit next. And now over here in my layers, I'm going to turn off every layer except for stock. I'm going to hide everything else. Now, your choices are you could go rectangular and not have the holes in the part, which is probably fine as long as you have the positions of where the holes are so we know to feed the wire through the right spot. You're good. You could also use a solid model, but that would entail you having a solid model. I got rid of my solid model. I didn't need it. All right. And then the last one is wireframe, and it's the one I'm going to go with. So I'm going to go ahead and pick my whole bit of wireframe here. And I'm going to tell it to calculate the stock. Now, if we look at our part and we look at the stock it created, it starts it at 0 and it dropped down 1 inch. The top of our part needs to match the top of this. And you can actually pick this by clicking in this box and then picking an edge on the top of your part. So now we're at the top of our part. It's 3 inches tall. And lucky me, the bottom of my part is right at 0. So that tells me that my part is 3 inches tall. So I'm going to change the height to 3 inches. The extrusion direction is in the Z axis. That's all fine. And then from here, we can hit next or forward. And then right here is where we have to go and pick our, our origin for the job. Now, you may pick the bottom. You may pick the top. You may pick a corner. You can pick wherever you want. Wherever you pick during this is where you need to pick it in the machine. Some machines and machinists prefer the bottom of the part. Some use the top. Some don't care. They'll pick it however it's the easiest. It's whatever works best for you for your specific machine. There really is no right or wrong answer when it comes to picking your work offset. As long as you can define it at the machine, you can use it here. So I'm going to click on origin, and then we're going to go right here to the center point. I'm just going to put it right there. Everything's going to be based off of that center point. And then I'm going to scroll down. We're going to use work offset number 1, and we're just going to hit OK. And that's going to put our part right there. So I always like to blank out my stock almost immediately because I really don't need to stare at it the whole time. So I'm just going to turn off the stock. Now, if we expand stock, we then have our material. Now, not every machine and post combination that we have has materials in it. It really depends on whether or not we have a database for your machine. In this case, I have tool steel. And if I right click on it, I could say edit. This allows me to choose the material or the wire diameter. Now, wire diameter is important, but it's only really important if BobCAD is the one that's doing the offset for you. If we're offsetting the wire or we're applying that, we call it system compensation, then it's going to be important because we're offsetting the radius of the wire. If you're doing this with, if you don't have the database, you might have a 10 thou wire, but in real life, you're running a 12 thou wire. That's fine. Just don't use system compensation. Let your machine do the compensation for you. We're going to output the G41 and the G42. You just have to make sure you do your offsets. And then as far as adding a material, because some of you guys will come in here, I can't remember what machine. Let's switch our machine real quick. Some of these do not have the database with them. So let me go to the, what did I use the most recently? The Alpha didn't have one. Alpha might have one. Let me edit again, pick a different machine. The Charme. One of them, some of them don't have the database, and they seem to be a very popular one. Might be one of the Mitsubishis. FA series. I don't know. Some of them don't have it, and so you won't be able to tell it what material it is. But it doesn't matter what material it is, because we're not going to define the feeds and speeds for any job that doesn't have a database attached to it. So you're going to be the one that defines your EPAC settings for the machine to run, in which case it doesn't matter what the material is. You're going to make sure to set up the correct feeds and speeds for the material that you're cutting. So doesn't really matter. The wire could be more important, but it really depends on how you're going through the job, and we'll talk about that when we get to that page here in a few minutes. So here's my part. I'm going to start off by doing just a little 2-axis, which is going to be this little slot right through here. And so for that, I'm going to turn off the stock and the CAD for right now, and I'm going to use the wireframe. It's a lot easier to use the wireframe or work with wireframe when you're doing your job this way. So one thing I could do, some of these do have tapers, so I can't go all the way around my part to cut it away. We will be doing some of this as some open cuts. This one right here is going to be an open cut as well. But that's my geometry, this little slot right here. So I'm going to right click on machine setup 1. And then there's our 6 tool paths. We have 3 tool paths for 2 axis and 3 axis. 3 tool paths for 4 axis. So we have an inside shape, an outside shape, and an open shape. An inside shape is any cut you want to do on the inside of your geometry. An outside shape is anything you'd want to do on the outside of your geometry. And open is any chain that is open. We have an open chain, so that's what we're going to use. So I'm just going to go say 2-axis open. We're going to select our geometry. Now, in version 36, when you're going to pick geometry, there's one thing you have to really pay attention to, and it's the auto connection button that is part of this picking manager right here. Some of you guys' picking manager pops up right there. I don't like it there. It gets in my way all the time, and I don't feel like zooming around. So what I do is I grab it, and I drag it over to my measure entity box, and I drop it right on this middle square that's right here. We drop it on there. If you drop it on any of the arrows, you'll get a split menu. If you don't drop it on any of them, it just places it down. So we want to drop it on that middle square, and it'll show up there. Now, essentially what auto connection does, for those of you that have been using BobCAD for a long time, when you hold shift on your keyboard and you pick a piece of geometry, you're doing a chain select. It will grab all the entities that are connected to that chain. But with auto connection turned on, you don't have to hold shift. It is nice in some situations. I use it a lot when I'm doing offsetting and everything. But when it comes to picking geometry, especially like this, where I have a connection on my chain, but I'm not going to use that connection. If I go and pick my geometry, it grabs the whole thing, and I don't want to cut that. So I can click that off. If I turn off auto connection, now we still have the ability to chain select. We just use chain select the way we've always done chain select, which is hold shift on the keyboard and then click on the shape. So you can still use chain select, and if you want to do the full chain, leave auto connection on. But since I don't want the whole thing, we have to pick this geometry. Now, I could drag a box, and I could pick each piece individually until I have one chain show up in this box. Don't worry that it says chain 8. It's one singular chain. There's not more than one chain in here. So you can do that. But if it's a nice chain, everything's connected properly, which it should be because we're at this point anyway. What we could do is I'm going to go ahead and pick the first entity here. I'm going to follow the chain around to where it ends. and I'm going to go ahead and find the midpoint of it, and I'm going to go past it. Now, if I don't go past the midpoint closer to the end I want to finish at, it'll chain the wrong way around the part. So I'm going to get rid of that. We're going to pick our first chain, follow the chain around, the end chain where I want to end. We're going to find about where the midpoint is, go past it. Now we're going to hold shift and click. So the first time we clicked the line, we did not hold shift. Second click, we hold shift. Right here's our chain. We can see our direction. So this being an open cut, when you're doing an inside or an outside cut, it automatically figures out, based on the direction of these arrows, whether we should be compensating to the left or to the right, G41 or G42. But in this one, because it's an open chain, we have to be sure that we pay attention to this arrow at this point, because we're going to have to tell it, I need to compensate to the left. So I need to make sure I'm set to left. Now, if I flip the direction of that, now I need to compensate to the right. So you want to make sure you're doing you're paying attention to this first arrow, especially on open shapes. Like I said, closed shapes, we can figure out which side of the chain we're supposed to be on, based on whether it's supposed to be inside or outside the geometry. And then right down here, excuse me, right down here, you can choose stop points. Now, stop points are points along the geometry that we can tell the wire to stop prior to it finishing its cut. So I can go right here and I can say that right there is a stop point. We're going to start. Where's our chain? Right there. Yeah. So we're going to start here. We're going to cut around, go all the way around. And by the time we get to right here, and you can pick a middle point, you can put your own points on the lines and pick them as well. The wire is now going to stop when it gets right there. So I can throw a magnet on right here and then hit cycle start and just let it finish the cut. And then I can take that piece out. So you don't have to use stop points. You can use glue stops. I prefer the stop points because they're a lot simpler to use, and I can really plan out where I want to put them. But you can do it however. We're going to see those options here in a second. So I'm just going to hit OK and then hit next. Right here for the feature, we have our stock thickness. We have our upper guide and our lower guide height. Excuse me. 2 seconds. We have our upper and lower guide positions. So in my case, we're saying 50 thou above, 50 thou below. Some machines use that information. Some don't care. Whether you got one of those machines is all that really matters. And then right here, you can process as a punch or you can process as a die. Now, a punch is going to process like an outside cut. And the way you can remember that is right over here for your taper settings. You can't do a land and taper on the outside. You can't. There's no option for that when you're doing an outside cut. When you go to die, you got your land and taper. So you can choose which one you want to process as. In this case, I'll process as a die. And then right here, we have our glue stop option. Now, if I want to use a glue stop, I have to pay attention more to my start points. We need to make sure they're good. I also have to make sure that we have our job set up correctly. There's a lot to using just stop points. A lot of times, if I have glue stops, if I have a stop point, I'm not going to use a glue stop. And I'm really a lot of times going to try and use stop points on open shapes anyway. Closed shapes, I might use a glue stop. Now, when you use a glue stop or when you turn it on, you'll see there's a tool path over here called a tab cut. The tab cut is not allowed with a glue stop or without a glue stop. So if I say no glue stop, when I hit next, that option is going to disappear because it's not allowed to be used. Now, on this wall that we're cutting, do we want a taper or a land and taper? For now, no, we're just going to say leave none. And then we'll go ahead and hit next. Right here, we have our machining strategy. So you'll see the tab cut disappeared because it is not part of a job when you have no glue stop. And so we just have our rough and our skim. Now, a lot of you guys probably know this already, but if you don't know, you don't actually need to add multiple skim passes here. I ran into one of the new guys recently, one of the guys I was teaching, and he was doing 3 skim passes. So he's coming in and adding 3 skim passes. And he had to redefine them every time. And he worked it out. He just had to make sure all his numbers were right. But you don't need this. We can actually close or delete those. Just leave a rough and a single skim because we can define multiple passes. So we'll go ahead and hit next again. For the wire, it's just our wire information. And if you have starting cutting conditions, you got to enter them in here. Not going to do that. For the posting, we could choose whether we what our tolerance is. We can set our work offset value and then our posting order. So individual shape means I'm going to do my rough and my skim on whatever shape I just picked. And it's more so if you have more than one piece of geometry in here. We're going to try and do 2 of them at the same time. I think their lands are the same height, so we should be able to. But I can say I want to do an individual shape, finish that shape before moving on to another one. We could also say I want to run by operation, where we're going to go and go do all of our rough cuts, then come back and do all of our skims. So that might be something I do if I was at the shop and I wanted to rough out the part so I could take the slugs out and then let it run at night just doing the skim passes. I could say, let's do it by operation. I'll get rid of the slugs, and when I hit go, I don't have to worry so much about that. Next, again, we have our machine sequence. So it's the organization of how we cut these pockets, whatever you want to call them, these profiles, if we did more than one. We're only doing one right now, so it doesn't matter. With this right now, it would just sort by if we had more than one. We're only going to have 2 at this point, but because everything else is going to be a separate toolpath. But yeah, you choose what you want. I usually would just say leave it on closest, watch it in the simulation. If you don't like the way it runs or you think it could run a more efficient way, you can do the X or Y direction. No sorting is the one that actually gives you the most control. The way no sorting is actually going to work is it's based off of the order that you pick the geometry in. So if you hold shift and you go pick each one of your chains in a specific order, because that's the order you want things to cut in, you want to choose no sorting because we're going to follow that order. Now, the time you have to be careful if there was a specific order is if you have all wireframes, say you have these 9 pockets here, if you drag a box over them, it's a random order, because when you drag a box, we don't grab anything until you drag and release your mouse to grab all the geometry. So all of those are grabbed randomly. No sorting is going to be very random in that case. But again, if you hold shift or you pick your chains in a very specific order, it's the order we're going to run them in. Next, we get to the parameters. So we can do a standard profile because it's a closed or it's an open shape. If we do an inside shape, which we'll see, we could also do a coreless cut. So right here, I kind of brought this up a little bit earlier. The system compensation for me when I'm doing wire is always pretty much going to be off because I want the machine to do the compensation. So system compensation, what it does is it takes the diameter of the wire, which we currently have set at 10 thou, and it moves it over by the radius of the wire. So we're going to move over 50 thousandths, or no, 5 thousandths, because we have 10 thou wire. So 5 thousandths. If you were using a bigger wire or a smaller wire, because you can't change the settings or whatever you see in here, that's going to cause a problem. But in this case, no matter what I put, when I use machine compensation, whether it's G41 or G42, what BobCAD's essentially creating is a center line cut, and then you're going to apply your offset to it. So I'm going to keep it on G41. That was the direction I set the geometry for earlier, so I'm going to leave it right there. On the rough cut, I'll tell it, yeah, let's go ahead and apply the stop points, and then we hit next. For the corner types, how do we cut the corners? So we have external corners and internal corners, and we could do sharp corners, we could do round corners. And the thing about this, the difference between sharp and round, if your part is drawn with sharp corners, it's still going to have sharp corners on it. The difference really shows up with the interpolation of the wire. If you go from sharp to round, sharp is going to make, say, a 90-degree sharp corner, where the round is actually going to roll the corner a little bit more. It's just the way that the wire is going to go around the corner. It should still give you a sharp corner. You can also do loop radiuses or length, so you can come off the part, do a loop, and then continue on. You can do the same kind of thing, but with a triangle, or you can even come in and do a bisected line where you're going to come up, back, and continue cutting. So I usually leave them on sharp. I usually don't have to mess with the corners. And then you have the same options for any internal corners on the part. Now, again, the big thing to remember, and I've had a few guys that have run into it or they thought they were running into it, round does not equal a radius corner. We're not telling, or we're not asking for what size fillet you want to put on there. If you want a round corner, make sure it's part of your geometry. All right, there we go. And then we'll go ahead and hit next. Now we have our leads. Now the leads are probably the most important / most difficult thing to get perfect. It's just one of those things it seems like you gotta fight with it quite often. That's part of the reason why I make sure before I actually go and start doing the tool path, I try and have everything laid out the way I want, in which I mean the stock. I have my holes in it. I know where all my pierce points are going to be, so it's all fine. The start hole diameter doesn't really matter unless you were doing a coreless cut, which is only going to show up with inside cuts. But the diameter doesn't really matter because we're not ignoring any bit of geometry here. If you're doing a coreless cut, where you're essentially turning the entire pocket into chips or dust, whatever you want to call it, you're removing all the material instead of just dropping a slug, then by defining the diameter, you're telling us how much of a hole we have in our part that we don't really have to worry about because it's already cleared out. So if you do put, say, a 1/4 inch hole in your part, I would go into here and tell it either I have a 1/4 inch hole, if you want to be exact, or I usually make it a little bit undersized so that the tool path starts just before it gets to that 1/4 inch diameter. But if you're not doing that, we're going to leave it at 0. We can thread the wire vertically. That's all we got. And then for your leads, you have only 6 options for leads. You have circular leads, so we can click on them and take a look at them. We have little circular leads. We have a perpendicular blend, kind of like a teardrop, but with a nice radius into the material. We have perpendicular, so just a straight line, but perpendicular from your geometry. We have parallel, which is what we're going to go with on this one. And then we also have select point. And this is the one we're going to use where we have to make sure our wire feeds through a specific location. The way we do that is we pick the points. I should be able to pick the points inside the arcs that I have on my stock layer to pick them, to get the origin for it. We're going to go with a parallel option here, and I'm just going to leave that at 100 thousandths. We got 2 nice straight walls that come to an end right there. Our stock is right there. We've sized the stock perfectly for this part. And so parallel is just going to start 100 thousandths out. It's going to cut the part, and it's going to come back out 100 thousandths. Next, we then have our cutting conditions. Now, this is going to be dependent fully on your machine, your database, whether or not you have a database, and what you need. A lot of guys that run wires do not put anything in on this page because they have to set all these settings up at the machine. They tell the machine how to cut it. You edit your code and you enter in your EPAC, or some of them we do have the settings for. The one thing I will point out is I can enter all this information in, but I'm only entering it for my rough cut. If I go to this edit table, I can actually see my rough and my skim. But I might not be doing just one skim. And if I'm going to set my feeds and speeds and offsets and everything I need, I'm going to do it when I can do all of them. So what I tell people is don't worry about the cutting conditions until the last page of the entire job, because at the last page, you're going to have every single cut defined, because we didn't get a chance to tell it that I'm going to do 2 or 3 skim passes on here. I haven't defined any of that yet. So I always ignore the cutting conditions until it's literally the last page when I can't hit next anymore. So next, there's our parameters. Once again, this is our skim pass. So we're going to do a standard profile. We could tell it first we want to flip the pass direction. So if we went, we'll say clockwise on the first pass, we're going to go clockwise or counterclockwise on the way back. We can tell it when we do these skim passes that we want to do skims in one direction or reverse them. So we do one and then back the opposite way. I'll do that one. And then for the number of skims, however many skims you need, I'm going to say 2. Once again, our compensation, we're going to say off on the system compensation and on the machine compensation with a G41. This time, though, hopefully at this point, my slug, I've gotten it released. I have a nice open channel in there. I am not going to apply stop points anymore. So we just uncheck that button. We'll go ahead and hit next. We have our corner types once again. Next, again, we have our leads. And you could set the same leads. We could just go change this to parallel. But one of the things I like to do and point out what I'm teaching you guys is there's a button down here called Apply to All Operations. This is a really handy button because I hate having to set the same settings multiple times. And so what I could do is if I go up to the leads page we were on earlier where I have parallel, I can say apply to all operations, go back down to the leads page under the skim, and now it's set to parallel. Where that really saves me time is when I'm cutting multiple pockets and each pocket has its own individual start point. I've gone and picked them when I did my rough pass. And by doing the apply to all operations, I can get all those same start points to copy to the leads of my skim pass. So sometimes that could be a tedious job having to go pick your start points. So we have the same ones now. And then next again, we have our cutting conditions. This is the time if I was setting up a job where I had to set up my offset, my power setting, feed rate, speed, or tension. Now is the time to go into the table because we have every cut. We can just click through these boxes and define what we need. You can even add comments and they'll output inside the code and hit OK. When we're all done, we can hit compute. And there is our toolpath right there. So now I'm just going to go ahead and blank that out before I start looking at any simulation or anything. I'm going to do some other features, but I want to point this out right here. When I have a stop point on my part, right here, we're looking at the skim cuts. Our stop point's right in this corner. Nothing happens. We told it not to do a stop on this one. If I go right here and I click on my rough pass, you will see a faint red line right there. That red line is my stop point. And in my G code, what it should do is it should put an M00 right there into the code. No, sorry, not right there. That's all my settings. Right there into the code. So as I'm cutting along the way, it's just going to stop, and then I cycle start and continue cutting. So that's how you can use stop points, and then glue stops would be a little bit different because we're actually going to stop short, and you can have leads and everything. But again, we'll shrink that up. Now let's go ahead and look at, I believe these two, this one here and this one here, are just land and tapers. If they're the same size land, we can do them at the same time. So I'm going to say evaluate and measure to. And I'm just going to measure from this line down here to the top right there. And we'll see that's 1/8 of an inch. And then I'm just going to reset the measure function. Go from here to here. Also 1/8 inch. That's perfect. So yeah, we can do these at the same time. So again, it's totally up to you how you do this, but you do have to make sure that you pick the correct piece of geometry when you're doing this, especially in a situation like we have here where we have the top and the bottom. I'm going to make sure that we pick the top shape for both of those. So I'm going to turn that whole shape off, the bottom shape. And I'm going to go over to the cam tree. We're going to right click on machine setup 1. And once again, we're going to do another 2-axis feature, this time inside. We're going to say select geometry, and I'm just going to hold shift on the keyboard and pick both of those shapes. And then we have our 2 chains. And so I always like to look at, if I turn on my stock right here and I go to a top view, so I'm just going to go right here to a top view. I always like to set this up so I'm close to where my planned start point is. So I'm going to set that guy right there. And this one's pretty close. I could leave it there. We're going to tell it to go right to the start point. So that's good. So there we go. I'll now hit OK and then hit next. I didn't set any stop points, but I could go set some stop points. I'm going to turn that to no glue stop. Now, in this case, we are doing a land and taper. The only difference between a land and a taper is really that you just choose whether you're doing a taper or a land and taper. It's really that simple. When you're doing your taper, you have a positive value that'll taper to the right. A negative value will taper to the left. I don't even care about any of that information. I'm just going to type in what I know the angle is. I'm going to hit compute. I'm going to go watch the simulation, see how it comes out. If I don't like the way it comes out, I'll switch that option. I'll change it from a positive to a negative or vice versa. So we're going to go with the land and taper. The taper angle, I'm not actually 100% sure what it is for this part. I'm going to just leave it at 3 degrees. I do know that the land height is only 1/8 of an inch. Right here, I'm telling it whether the land is on the top or the land is on the bottom. So in this case, land is on top. And then if we uncheck that, it would put land on bottom. And then the taper display setting is just what the toolpath looks like when we watch it inside when we see it inside the CAD window there. So we're just going to hit next. Right here, once again, rough and a skim. And what you'll start to notice at this point is that this is a very, very repetitive set of toolpaths. The difference is, like right here, I could do a coreless cut. I can't do a coreless with the land and taper. So if you go back, if I was to just go to the feature page and just said none, I can now do a coreless cut. So the coreless cut is just going to take out the whole piece. Everything's going to become dust. So let's go back to our land and taper. That's all good. And then there we are. Now for the compensation, once again, I always go with the machine compensation. Right here, it's asking whether we want to apply a taper. And yes, I would like to taper my first pass. And then do we apply stop points? We would if we had some. In our case, we don't have any. So it doesn't really matter whether that's checked or not. I usually leave it checked because I might come add one later on and I don't want to have to remember to come turn that back on. So for now, we'll just hit next. For the corner types, we're just going to leave them on sharp. Next, again, we have our leads. So we have our diameter. Again, not really that important. We have our thread vertical and then our leads down here. And this is the important ones. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to use the select point option. It does have an option here. It's called perpendicular to closest. Let it see where the point is and then go to the closest point on your chain. Or it's going to go directly to the start point that we set. So I'm going to try and get mine to go to the start point. I'm going to say pick points. And I'm almost positive, yes, we should be able to pick these center points and I don't have to actually go put anything down. There's point number 1. And then right here, we pick that. I usually put points on my part, especially if I have a bunch of pockets to do. I'll actually put points and put them on their own layer so I can pick them and just drag a box and it'll find those points. Then I'll hit OK. The first point's there. You can't see the full list of points, but BobCAD does know it's there. While I'm here, I'm going to say apply to all operations. So it's going to copy those down to here. And then we can go next again. Right here's our cutting information. Again, I wouldn't touch it yet. We're not on the last page. Right here, we're going to tell, let's do 2 skims, same direction. That's fine. And it's, again, just repeating the same things. We've already copied the leads page over. That's great. And then our cutting conditions. This is where we would edit our table, and we're going to hit compute. And real quick, I'm just going to go up here and hit save, just so everything gets saved. And actually, that looks pretty close to what we're going to be. It might be a slight little bit different with the taper value. It might be 2.5 degrees instead of 3. I'll leave it there. I'm not too worried about it. But there it is. And at this point, we can turn off our stock and move on to the next one. So we'll do let's see, what can we do with an outside? I don't have any 2-axis outsides. Well, let's go in and we'll just cut the stock. So let's do this. I'm just going to right click and add a new layer. And I'm going to call this my 2-axis outside, just so we can see one. And it can kind of prep the part a little bit more. We got to do it either way. So I'll put that there. I'm going to turn on my part. And I'm going to hide everything else. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a 2-axis cut to do all of the outside, but I'm going to have it ignore this shape here and this shape here because those are, I believe, 4th axis. So I'm going to go to Create 2D, Extract Edges. At this point, you can go and do an auto connection. This does come in handy because I can actually pick the edge of a part, click on it. It'll grab the entire chain around the edge of the part, including that little guy. But the difference is I didn't pick the surface, so I don't have all these other features. So when I hit OK and I cancel out, if I turn off my CAD layer, I have, let me blank out that toolpath. I have all of my, just the wireframe. I don't have any of the internal shapes, which is good. So now what I'm going to go and do is I'm going to go back to a top view and I'm going to delete the stuff I don't need. So I'm going to go in and I am going to pick this whole side right here, like so. And I'm going to deselect that one line right there because I'm going to use that line to connect back up to this arc. So I want to make sure I grab this line too and delete it. And I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to pick this whole shape. I'll pick that first, hit delete. I'll pick this top line, hit delete. And now I have these 2 lines that all I now have to do is join back up. You can join them with a line, or in my case, I'm going to go to utilities, trim one entity. I'm going to pick that line, go up to this arc up here where it connects, and it'll connect. Same thing on this side from here up to here. And so that is something we can do with just a 2-axis outside cut. So I'm going to shrink this up. You could also do, maybe you had this part, it was already cut to this size and it was cut to this size. You can also do a 2-axis open, and you could say, I just want to go in and cut that, and I'm going to come in and cut that. That way you're not doing the full shape, but I'm going to do it anyway. So we're going to go 2-axis outside. I'm going to select my geometry. Again, I'm going to pick the chain. I do have auto connection on, so I didn't have to hold shift. It's just something that get used to looking at that box because it's a little frustrating one. And then I'm going to check my chain, and I'm going to put it right there. I'll put it in the center and then flip it. So we're going clockwise around the whole thing. And then I'll hit OK. And then next. All of this stuff I'm pretty much going to leave the same. I'm going to do no glue stop. I don't have a taper. Most of this is the exact same as what I set up prior to this. It's the same information. I don't have stop points. Leads, perpendicular. Sure. 100,000 should be fine if my stock's cut correctly. Once again, how many skim passes? We'll do 2. And then our leads, same thing, and then hit compute. And there's our lead right there. And it's just going around the outside. So once again, we can blank that out, shrink it up. Now, I do want to do an example real quick of a glue stop job. So I'm just going to do this real quick. I'm going to copy this tool path. I don't need to copy it. We'll start from scratch. I'm just going to do the same part once again. On this little guy here, just to go through that example. We go to 2-axis inside. We select our geometry. I'm going to go ahead and pick my geometry, tell it my start point's right there, and then hit OK. Now, on this one, I could say either use a glue stop with leads or use a glue stop without leads. So it's just going to be really dependent on how you're going to be gluing up the part, what you want it to do when it's done, where are you working, can you lead back out? You do have to be careful of quite a few things in here. We'll talk about it. So I'm going to do a glue stop with leads. Right here's where you define how wide the stop point is. And then we'll do our land and taper. So I'll set it here, say 0.125. And then we'll go next. So in this case, we're going to do a rough cut. That would then finish. We'd be able to put our glue, our magnet, whatever we got on it to stop it. And then we could go and do our tab cut. And then we come in and do our skim cuts. So it's not too much different from the normal, but it is slightly different because we have to pay more attention to the leads on this. So for my lead in, I want to go right here. I'm going to say, let's select a point. I'm going to pick my point. And I'm going to pick it. Oh, got to turn on my stock layer. And I'm going to pick it as the middle point of this. Hit OK. And then when I lead out, a lot of times I'm just going to go in and do a lead out and say, let's do a perpendicular lead out. And I'll leave it at 100 thousandths. All right. So I'm now going to hit next. We have our cutting conditions. Now on the tab cut, I can tell it to lead in from 100 thousandths away and then go and cut the pass. So we're just going to do this. I'm not going to say flip pass direction. We are applying our taper still. This needs to match whatever we had set up for the rough cut. And so there it is. Our lead. So I'm going to go perpendicular. And then for the lead out right here, I can actually send it back to a certain position, or I could say just do another perpendicular. So I'm going to leave it on the same right now. We'll see it. And then cutting conditions. And then we get to our skim where once again, we'll go 2, and then next leads. This one, I could say really at this point, the whole core is gone. I'm fine with that. So I'm just going to hit compute. And just so we can see it, let me blank this out, or let me turn it sideways. So we're going to start by going in right here. We're going to cut in. We're going to go around, make our cut, and then we're going to lead out right there. Then we go to our tab cut. We're going to lead right back in where we were. We're going to cut the tab and come over, and I can slap a magnet or glue over here at that point. And then that's it. We're going to come in and do the next cut. We're going to do our skim pass. So there it is. And actually, this might not be a bad one to, instead of doing perpendicular leads, we can go with parallel leads. There we go. Now it can come right in there, around. That looks good. We could do that for the rough pass as well. But again, it's up to you how you use it and how you want the system to define it. I've worked with a lot of guys now that after showing them the stop points, that's enough. They don't need much more. They don't need to do a whole tab cut. They could just have the wire come to a stop, put their magnet on, and then run it, and then move on. So there it is. We're just going to turn off. Actually, we're going to delete that feature there because that's the only one. Yeah, delete this one. All right, now we can start looking at a couple 4-axis scenarios. Now, I like to treat the 4-axis kind of independently. Each one is independent. You don't have to, but you might want to. I don't know. It's up to you. But I do need both layers on. You don't have to have them on at the same time. We could change this. So I'm going to start by let's go ahead and do, what's the simplest kind of looking one? Let's do these two right here. So we'll go from this middle one down to that other shape there. So the main difference between this is really just, you pick the same thing. This is an inside shape. So I'm going to say 4-axis inside. We pick our upper geometry. So I'm going to pick that shape there. All right. We then go pick our lower geometry. I'm going to pick that shape right there. And probably arguably one of the most difficult things to do is set up the best start point for it. So if I go to my upper chain, it's trying to start right there. If I go to my lower chain, it's trying to start right there. Now you need these to be somewhat close to each other, preferably really close to each other. If I click right here, now I'm in a line with the other one. And actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the middle of that line and the middle of that line. So I could just use some straight over leads. And by having those synced right off the start and making them synced, you're going to have a much better finish. If you did try and start here and say you accidentally picked your other start point, down here, your wire is going to feed in that way and it's going to be crisscrossed, and then trying to go around the part, it ain't going to work. So I'm going to go right there, and then also pay attention, make sure they're going in the same direction. Otherwise, the top guide's going to try and go left, bottom's going to go right, and it ain't going to work. Sync lines are another part of this. I'm going to show you guys an example of sync lines in a few minutes after we do a couple of these. So for now, sync lines are not optional. You don't need them. They are optional, but you may need them for more complex geometry. So I'm just going to hit next. And then right here. Now, I'm not going to do any glue stops. If there's a taper, the taper is defined with my 4-axis cut. I don't need to worry about that. So the last thing here is the syncing options. The syncing options are, if you don't put sync lines in, and we're going to talk about these and I'll show you sync lines, you can tell it to go by entity. So by entity is basically, if I have 4 entities on my top chain and I have 4 entities on my bottom chain, they should hopefully line up fairly nicely. This is a good example of a part that should cut pretty good by entity because we have an arc, we have a line. The only problem could be these arcs here, just because this is 3 pieces of geometry versus 1, but it usually does okay. We'll see all of them. But you could say go by entity, go by proportion, which again, this might also be a really good idea because these are very similar and it can kind of follow corner to corner. Or we could say go by closest. So let's go by entity first, and we'll see if we have any issues with it. We'll just hit next. Right, here's our machining strategy. Again, just a rough and a skim. Wire info, posting, parameters, same thing. Leads, we're going to go with select point, and then we'll pick our point, and we just have to turn on our stock layer, and it's this dead center point right there. Hit OK. And then we'll go next. Actually, previous, we're going to say apply to all operations. Then we could go next, and we can, again, do 2 skim passes. We'll reverse them this time. Leads, I just hit the apply to all and then compute. And so what I'm looking for is any twists in that green. Now you will really see it. You'll see it a lot better when you simulate it. But if I see any weird twists, then it's a sign something bad happened. So that's by entity, and it looks pretty good. If we go by proportion, also looks pretty good. We can also go by closest, which also looks pretty good. So I think any one of those is going to work. This shape over here, this blisk that we have, is a little bit more temperamental with that. So we'll look at that in a minute. But really, that's an inside shape. Let's go ahead and do our outside shape. We'll do this guy right over here, just this open chain. So I'm going to right click on it. We're going to do a 4-axis open. We're going to select our upper profile. I'm going to hide the stock for right now. And this one's going to be another one that's tricky to pick if this option is turned on. So I'm going to turn that off. The upper chain is going to be this edge here around to this entity right here. So hold shift, pick it. And we can check our direction in a second. The second entity is going to be this guy here around to that right there. So we have our 2 chains. So we're going from we'll say right to left on that one. We're going from right to left on that one. They should start and end. They kind of have their own syncing done to them. We don't need sync lines on this. Fit all. And then we can hit OK. Next, once again, I'm pretty much going to go with the same thing. We process as a punch or a die. I'm going to process this one as a die. And we're just going to say by, we did by entity before. Let's say by proportion this time. Again, I don't really anticipate having too many differences between these options for kind of simpler geometry, especially geometry that have very similar proportions or number of entities. Kind of works it out for us. So next, I'm really not changing much. Just gonna next my way through, set up some leads. Let's give this one some parallel leads right there. Oh, skim passes, we can do 2. Like I said, this is not the most fun. it's not, yeah, it's really not too fun. I mean, it's wire. It's very simple in what we're doing. It's got some, kind of very simple methods. So this one looks a little funky. I'm going to go in and I thought, well, yeah, our direction's correct. Oh, I guess I flipped that one. Maybe I clicked on it. I'm going to reverse that direction there. So this is what will happen. This is a good, exact, perfect situation to show it. I'm going to turn everything off real quick, except for that guy there. We're going to go start the simulation. And you can't miss it. I mean, the simulation is always going to show you the problem that you're going to have. So make sure you're watching your simulation. You can do it after every toolpath, or you can do it once in a while. I usually do it once in a while, or really I do it at the end of all my toolpaths and then go fix the things that are broken. If you want to see guides inside your simulation, you got to turn on this button here called Machine Housing. And then that might be easier to spot your wire, but they do get in the way later on. So we're just going to say run, and you'll see it tilt the wire. This one's going to be a little crazy. And it's all because our start point for the bottom chain is upside down, or it's backwards. So now we're going to go in and do our cuts. And we never actually exit out of the wall properly. If you ever want to see what it's going to look like, I'm actually going to go down here to the measure tab. And there's an option in here called remove chips, only keep one part. Now, if these pieces are properly disconnected, which they should be, I can actually hover over the part and click on it with my middle mouse wheel like a button. And that would be the cut that we make on there. And I have actually done some parts like that where guys are making like an hourglass cut, one on the top, one on the bottom. But that is not what we want here. And so we'll close this. And we already figured out what the problem was. We just have to go to our lower geometry or our upper. It doesn't matter which one. There is no wrong one here. We just have to make sure we get it right. Especially since we told in this open shape, we told it that we were doing a G41. So I do want to go. So we're compensating to the left. So the bottom one is wrong. So I'll reverse that one and then recompute. And there you go. Now you can see there's none of those twists in it. And it should be good. So just like that. All right. Now we'll shrink that one up. So that was our 4-axis open. And then that's really it. I don't have any 4-axis outside shapes here. But this is where it really gets good. So one of the biggest things about Wire EDM and how do you make it faster? How do you do all this? So the best way to really kind of speed up the process is remembering the tool paths that are very similar to the ones you've done in the past. And And so if I'm doing another 2-axis inside shape and I didn't change my wire diameter and everything's pretty much the same, copy and paste toolpaths, save and load toolpaths. You can copy and paste from one window to another window. So if I'm working on a job where maybe I'm doing something that I've done before, but I don't do it often, I can open up the part that I've done before, copy that toolpath and steal that one, bring it over to the other job, paste it down and run it again. And it speeds up the entire process. Now, when you do that, when you copy and paste or you save and load, we remember everything about that toolpath except for your geometry, your stop points, and your directions of cuts and everything. So you got to make sure you pick your geometry. We're going to do that here in a second. The other side of it is getting your leads right. I end up having to almost always go back into the feature and pick new leads. So to save a toolpath, you can actually just right-click on the toolpath and say Save Feature. And it will save inside of our Features folder, inside of our BobCAD data. You can also just copy and paste. And that's what we're going to go with right now, because we're going to do this little comb shape here that we have as a 4-axis open cut. And so to do this, I'm going to take my original 4-axis open that I had, and I'm going to say, let's copy it. I'm going to right-click on Machine Setup 1 and paste the feature. So now I can go in and right-click and say I want to pick my upper geometry, and I'm going to start right on this entity right here. And I'm going to end at this entity right here. Again, when you're getting to your final entity and my auto connection is turned off, I'm going to hold Shift. I want to go beyond the midpoint, closer to the end I'm ending at, hold Shift, and then click. And then for the lower geometry, I'm going to pick this edge here, past the midpoint, hold Shift and click. And then we can look at our 2 chains. So that one is going left to right. So I want these ones to match what hopefully I've already set up. I set these up with a G41. I now have my direction as a G41. So there we are. They're both set up for G41. Let's make sure they don't flip this time. Yeah, that looks good. My leads that I applied on this one were the parallel leads. So those are fine coming off these straight walls that I got. That's great. So I'm going to hit compute, and now we have that one done. And again, you can't really gauge it off what you see in the toolpath. Make sure you run your simulation. We're going to simulate all these at the end. So I'm going to blank that out. There it is. So what else do we have? We have a few more shapes. We're going to do them at the same time for some of them. So I'm going to take the 4-axis inside that we created. I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to paste it down there. And then for the geometry, I am going to go in and pick my upper shape. So I'm going to turn off. I don't have to turn anything off. I just got to rotate. So that's done. That's done. This is done. The side's done. So we have these 3. So I'm going to pick this. I'm going to pick this, and I'm going to pick this. And again, I'm just holding Shift on the keyboard, or if auto connection is on, it'll automatically do it. For the lower geometry, I'm going to go ahead and pick this one here, this oval here, and this ellipse here. And then this is where it gets important, because we want to make sure we have some start points that are very, similar if we can. So for this one, I'm going to put this in the middle right here. I'm going to put this one on this end right here. And on this one, I guess we'll go right there. And then we're going to go to our second chain, and we're going to pick kind of the same stuff. I'm going to go there on that one, there on that one, there on that one. I want these to be as close to lining up with each other as possible, so that they don't come in with crisscrossed lines and I have to fix them later on. So there it is. We're going to hit that. We're going to hit OK. Now, because we did separate shapes, we still have to come in and do our start points. So if we go back into our feature, we can go to our leads page. I'm going to say select a point. I'm going to say pick points. And I'm going to make sure to X all. It shouldn't have anything selected. And then again, I'll turn on my stock. I'm going to hide the bottom wireframe and go to a top view real quick. So I'm going to look right through my part. That's going to be one of the start points. That's going to be another start point. That's going to be another start point. So we can do multiple start points at once. And then I'm just going to hit compute. And there it is. Is it not letting me? Can I only do one 4-axis? You might only be able to do one 4-axis at a time. All right, that's fine. I'm going to cheat here. I'm going to right-click on my geometry, or I'm going to right-click on that toolpath. There's one other copy feature that we actually have, and it's called Copy with Geometry. So I'm going to try this. I'm going to say copy with geometry. I'm going to blank that out, and I'm going to paste it right there. I'm going to paste it again. So I have three of the same tool paths now. On this first tool path, I'm going to go back into the geometry, and I'm going to deselect these two, and I'm going to hit OK. Oh, and I could deselect the bottom ones as well. So we'll deselect. Oh, no, I want that one selected. I'm going to deselect that one and that one. Make sure my start point's there. And let's see if it saved it. Hit OK. Compute. And let's see. We got our 4-axis. All right, I got to go fix the skim pass on here. Or I got to say apply to all operations. And we should have our cuts. Now, what I'm hoping for with this is when I picked all those in the first one, like we still have these three, I'm going to go in and edit these. And this time I'm going to deselect that one. And I'm going to deselect that one. And then also this one. I don't know why I left it selected. Upper, this one. And I'm going to hit OK. And then I think what I forgot to do earlier was I forgot to say apply to all leads. So I'm just going to do that and then hit compute. And now we have the middle shape. And I didn't have to go repick the start point. I picked it when I picked the other ones. So not the worst case, not the worst thing in the world that we didn't have it. Or that we can't do more than one, or it got confused on something. I'm not sure. On the last one here, I'm going to deselect this one and this one. And then also this one and this one. And then we'll just hit OK. And I'll hit compute and just see if I was right. Yeah, so what happened here is this one's got the wrong start point, so we'll fix that anyway. But it's trying to go back to 0 because I didn't grab the right thing earlier. So I'm just going to go into my leads page. I'm going to go and repick my points, just repick them completely, or just pick the one I want right there. Hit OK. And then I'm going to make sure to hit that button to apply it to all operations. So it goes to the skim pass as well. And there we have it. All right. So for the last one, all of those look pretty good. I'm actually pretty confident most of those are going to work. For the last one, we're going to do another 4-axis inside. We're going to say copy. And we're going to paste it down. And this one's going to be done with this kind of blisk here. Now, this one, it may work. It may not work. It depends on the day sometimes. So I'm going to pick these two and then check my chains. Now, what's really difficult about this is really getting the chain to be, kind of starting in the same spot. That's probably the most difficult. So I'm going to say, yes, that's fine to start there. On the other chain, on this bottom chain, we're going to start in the middle right there. So we do have a little bit of a shift on it. We'll see how it goes. Just going to go ahead and hit OK. And then we're going to go into our feature and set up our leads. So we're going to say pick points. We're going to pick the middle point right there. Apply to all operations and then hit compute. And, it's been a while since I saved. Hopefully it's just thinking. I don't remember if this one does have a compute. I'm going to let it sit. Usually I'd get impatient and I'd just shut it down myself. But this one, I can't remember if the Wire EDM does the whole calculating thing like Mill does. So let's give it a second because this is a fairly complex piece of geometry it's got to try and figure out right now. But there's more I wanted to do to this. So hopefully we're just waiting. I don't know for sure yet. I'm just going to open up my task manager real quick. Yeah, I got really high memory usage on it right now. So I'm going to let it sit a little bit longer. If you guys have any questions, this is a great time to throw them in. Put them in the chat. That would be awesome. I'd love to answer some of your guys' questions. See what you guys are actually running into with this stuff. So if you do have any, let me know. Otherwise, I'm kind of just going to let it sit. I haven't saved recently, and I'm kind of upset about that. But I do have the part backed up with the right stuff. I just didn't want to do it. All right, I'm gonna shut it down. And we'll see if it locks up there again, then it might have just been calculating a tool path, but it didn't have the calculate button showing up. So I think we have all the CAD done. I can knock out the tool paths pretty quick, but we'll do that. Let me see what we got so far. Let's see. It's been a while since I saved. All right. So we got to that point right there where we had the 2-axis done. Yeah. All right. All right. So I'm just going to go in and do the 4-axis inside again. I'm going to do the same blisk and see what happens to it. Right there and right there. There, down to there. We'll pick the same midpoint there. I think that's close. So annoying. All right, we're going to hit OK. No glue stop. And I am getting back to the point right now where I could copy and paste it real quick, and I might do that just to see. But this is the one that really actually is different than the rest of them. So we're going to say select point. We're going to pick our point. We got to turn on our stock there. This is the one that can kind of cause more problems based off of the way it syncs using the regular options. We'll say 2 skim passes, and then we're going to hit compute. Yeah, see, it worked fine. It should have. There was no reason it should have done what it did last time, of course. So I'm going to give it a save now just so I have it. So that looks pretty good. It actually, they might have done some bigger improvements than I really know about on here. But sometimes things don't work nicely. And before I go and do those, I'm going to just copy this real quick. We're going to say copy right there. And I am just going to knock out these other tool paths. So give it a save. Paste that feature. Paste that feature. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, I believe. So that, and one more. Paste that feature. All right, upper geometry for this one. We got auto connection on that. Lower geometry, that. I don't get to pick my start point here. That'd be nice if I could pick my start point, but all right, chain, we're going to go that side there. Chain, we're going to go that side there. And then I'm going to hit OK. And then go and compute that tool path. So there's that one. Looks good enough for now. And start point's off. So I have to go back in there real quick. Just do my leads. We're going to select our start point as that point right there because it was going to the origin point, not where we wanted to go. Apply to all, compute, and there we go. All right, that one's done. And then we'll go do the next one. So it's going to be this one, chain middle. That's it. We'll hit OK. Go in real quick. We'll pick our start point. Compute. Oh, I forgot to do the stinking button once again. We got to go to this leads page, apply to all operations, then compute. There we go. All right, we're going to give it a save because I'm losing all this stuff again. And then the upper geometry. Another way of doing this, and I am going to do it in a minute. Right there. Chain there. Okay, let's go edit our start point. Boom. Pick the start point once again. Give me that one right in the middle. Come on. That, okay. Apply to all operations. Compute. That one's good. And then finally, we can knock out this one real quick. So that one, I'm just going to set the start point while I'm doing it. That one, set the start point where I'm doing it. Hit OK. Edit the feature. Leads, select points. I will say it always goes faster the second time. So if you do lose your work, I guess that's the one good thing. Happy accidents, right? There we go. That looks pretty good. So we'll shrink that up, blank all those out. So we got all those in there. Again, I do have to do the 4-axis open. But what I'm going to do instead of doing the 4-axis open from scratch again, I'm actually going to go up here to File. And I'm going to open up the original part that this had that was on this thing. And I have on here a 4-axis open. So this is exactly what I'm talking about. If you have a part that you've done something similar on before, I'm going to copy that feature. I'm going to jump back over this file and I'm going to paste it down. And I'm going to go and pick my geometry. So I need to turn off that option there. I'm going to hide the stock for now. There we go. That gets rid of some of that line. So from there over to here, and then from here over to here. If you're watching this in the future and don't know how I just did that, rewind the video about 15 minutes and you'll see it. All right, so we're going to the left there, to the left there. I'm going to hit OK. This one doesn't need anything fancy, so I'm just going to make sure we got parallel leads. Those are great. That looks good. Kind of. Yeah, that looks good. They synced. Okay, and then I'm going to copy that one again. The only thing we're going to be missing now is going to be the outside, but I'm going to cheat that too real quick. So copy that right there, paste it right there. Upper geometry is going to start here. It's going to end right over here. And then bottom is going to start right here and end over here. Just like that. So those two, hit OK. This should have the parallel lead, so we'll compute that again, shrink it up, hit save. Now, what I'm going to do different for the 2-axis outside shape is I'm going to take this 2-axis open we made. I'm going to say copy. I'm going to paste it down. Where is it? Paste feature twice. Now, the geometry for this, I'm going to go ahead and pick as this arc right here. So from right there around to right here. We do not need to pick the other bottom side because there isn't a bottom side. I'm going to hit OK. And then on this one, I'm going to change my leads real quick to, let's do some circular leads. And I'm going to leave them right there like that. Just hit compute and see what they look like. That ain't the circle I was thinking it was. Oh, hold on. Same thing once again. I have to come in here and say apply to all operations. I'm just going to say 0.1.1 for both of them. Compute. Yeah, I forgot to hit the stinking button again. All right, this one. Apply to all operations. Compute. There we go. That's got it. So now instead of using this other one, I'm just going to delete this. The reason being, I'm going to copy this feature again. And I'm going to paste it down. And then go and pick the geometry for the other side. From right here over to here. Check my chain direction, hit OK, and compute that. And it should be the exact same as the other toolpath. So the only thing we're missing is nothing. I believe we have all the shapes getting cut. We're going to hit save just in case. And then hopefully everything cuts great. If not, we're going to find out here real quick. So I'm going to say start simulation and wait for it to load. Click the wrong button there. There we go. All right. So here it is. And again, you can turn on your guides by turning on the machine housing here. And I'm just going to slow it down a bit, say run. We're not going to go too slow, though. Really, I'm not too concerned with how it runs. I'm concerned with how it finishes and how everything looks when I'm done. So a lot of times, just let it run. And at the end, we're going to use this feature right here called remove chips, only keep one part. And what it should do is it should delete every slug that's left in this part. It should take them all out for us. So this is the one I'm most concerned with, only because I've done this part a bunch of times and it rarely comes out perfectly after the first try. But I'm also going to show you guys how to set up some sync lines real quick. Sync lines are much easier done with a solid because a lot of solid models do actually have their sync lines kind of built into them. So we'll look at that right there. And then that there. And if you imagine, a lot of these pieces are going to be disappearing as you're kind of cutting them. So there we go. Double skim. Triple skim? Did I do 3 skim passes? Oh, I did 3 on that one. right there. The main thing here is if something doesn't go right, a lot of times you can tell because of this step that we're going to do next, which is removing the chips from the part. If the chips don't release from the part, it means that there's still something connecting it. Now, I have had times where it's partly the simulation that's doing it. So kind of the quality of the simulation that does it. But I'm just going to go hover over my part. Now, in this case, I'm using remove chips, only keep one part. Get rid of everything that's not attached to this part. And so I put my cursor on the part that I want to keep. So right here, this main part, and I use my middle mouse wheel to click on it. And this one's got a lot of shapes to remove, so we're going to wait. There it is. And there is our part. And honestly, that piece right here came out good. Everything looks great. I mean, it looks good. We could even go out and turn on our workpiece and see yeah, that's not great. Never mind. This is totally backwards. So our chains are linking into the wrong spot. So that's good to see. Everything else matches up pretty good. Like I said, a little wider on the tapers for those ones, but that's just a quick change of the part. So I am going to go back out here. And what we're going to do this time, I'm going to give it a save again because I like the way it is now. I'm going to add a new layer and call it sync lines. Oh, caps lock's already on. Is it? No, it is. Sync lines. There we go. And I'm going to turn everything off for right now. I just want nothing, but I do want to turn on the model. And so here's what we're going to do. We are going to go in. We're going to go up to utilities, not utilities, create 2D, and we are going to extract edges one more time. So the same way we got the top and the bottom wireframe, we're going to do that. The difference, though, is I'm going to say pick whole solid. I'm going to pick the whole solid, not project it to any plane, and hit OK. When I'm done with that, I can turn off the CAD, and there is all of the geometry. It's basically the wireframe for it. Solid models are nice because the surfaces themselves a lot of times link your your sync lines. They are your sync lines, the surfaces themselves. You can have times where they're not. This is a good example of a smooth surface. There is no sync line there. If I turn this off, I don't have any lines. But you could go in and add lines. You could add sync lines a lot of times just by connecting a line from the bottom to the top and from the bottom to the top. And you can just continue connecting your lines. What we're going to do, though, is get rid of a bunch of geometry here. So I'm going to go to a top view, and I'm doing that because I'm going to start by just dragging a box. Now, basically, I want to drag a box and just not touch that blisk shape right there. As long as I don't touch that, we're good. So I'm going to delete all this stuff. I'm going to come in from this side, get as far as I can in, delete all that. I'm going to delete all that. And then right here, I got a little bit left. We'll delete that. Now, after I have everything there deleted, I'm going to switch to a front view. Oh, we got a line right there that we almost missed. Delete that guy. And I am now going to drag a box over all of those lines. So I'm going to drag a box over them. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag a box over everything. And what that does is it deselected the middle lines and it selected the top ones so I can go in and delete them. And there we have it. So these are the sync lines. So I want to start by going to the cam tree. And we're going to go to this shape wherever I put it, whichever one it is, this one here. And I'm going to look at one thing first, my start points. I want to make sure I'm starting fairly similar in positions. That's part of the reason we're switched right there, you can see. So if I turn this back on just for a visual, I'm going to come in. We're on that one. I need to move this lower start point. I'm going to say modify start point. I need to move it one step over. And then I'll hit OK. And then I'm going to just recompute that now. And then save. And then real quick, just to see it, I'm going to turn everything off using this little button. Yours may be on the opposite side of the cam tree. And I'm going to turn that on, start the simulation, and just see this one feature real quick. Because we might not actually need the sync lines now. Well, we'll say run. We could speed that up a bit. And we'll compare that to our workpiece again. That's a little closer. Looks a little better. We can probably do better, especially in those corners. But those are at least now tapering the right way. But again, it locks that angle in. If you're off on your start, you're going to be lagging behind on the bottom of the cut. So for the sink lines, I'm going to turn everything off but that sink lines layer. And what we now have is an option right here for sink lines, or you'll even see it during when you're picking your geometry. It's down here at the bottom for sink lines. I'm going to just pick all those sink lines and hit OK. And then I'm just going to recompute that feature. And it should use the sink lines over the other options of the by proportion, by entity, all that stuff. I don't know. Oh. That looks a bit better. So all the blue lines that you see, they should be synced up with that. And if we really want to find out, we can go in here and turn this off. And that looks a lot more consistent. Yeah, let's see what that looks like. So again, we'll run the whole thing this time. So turn everything on. We'll give it a save. That's usually my signal to save is before I launch the simulation, I make sure to hit save, start the simulation, and we're just going to let it rip. So once again, let's go over here. I'm going to hide my workpiece, and we'll say run. And if we turn our guides on, we can actually kind of see where we're working. And you can actually use the remove chips at any point. I could go and click on it now, and it'll actually start removing the chips as I'm cutting the part, which is nice. And there it is. Let's see what it looks like. Oh, something went weird there. Let me go up here. Right here. Apply, refine. Something weird happened. There we go. There's my corner. And then why are we not getting rid of those side pieces? All right, whatever. I'm not too worried about it. Yeah, there it is. And if you zoom in, when you see real bad finishes, zoom in. Make sure you look at them because a lot of times it'll clean it up. So you just wait. There's a thing that usually pops up down here, says automatic quality improvement, or you can go up to the verification tab and say apply, refine. There it is. When you do the apply, refine, just be careful. It only refines what's in your screen. And then to bring it back, you say reset, refine, which does reset kind of the overall quality of the part. Why is it not doing the automatic cleanup? Usually pops up right here doing it. Might have been because I hit the refine button. But there it is. That's our finish. Not too shabby. So now we can close that. And there it is. So then the last bit of any job inside of BobCAD, any job at all, is posting code. And if you want a setup sheet, you can generate a setup sheet. So we'll post our code. If you're doing it all at one time, you can just hit post right up here. If you're doing, your 2-axis or something first, remember you have the post yes, no button. Now all of them are turned off. If I hit post, nothing happens. So I can go and turn on individual features and say, okay, I just want to output my 2-axis open. Now I want both of them. I can do them all at the same time and turn them all on. Or in version 36 here, you could actually go to the specific toolpath you want. You could right click on it and say post. And it'll post just that one operation. And then real quick, I'll post one more time. We'll post the whole job. To save the code, you just right click, save as, make sure it has the correct file extension, and you save it and send it out to your machine. If it doesn't have the correct file extension, you can right click on CAM defaults, go down to current settings. This is where you'd also pick your default machine. So go pick your machine, say set as a default, and then on the EDM posting tab, you have your file extension that you can set right there. And then I'm just going to cancel out. I didn't make any changes. The last thing you could do is, or what I like to do is I'll set this part up on an isometric view. So I'll set it up like this, and then I click on my machine setup. Now, what that does for me is it allows me to generate a setup sheet. We actually have a setup sheet for the wire, and I can hit OK. And it's going to take that setup sheet and it's going to load it inside your browser. So it's going to load it right there. Now, I can't come up with a cycle time because I didn't give it any feeds and speeds. But what it does, and the reason I set it up the way I did, is it takes a picture of my part. It shows me where my origin is. It tells me what kind, what size my stock is. And then it has information about every cut that I'm making. So you can find out how long the cut is. You can just get all that information, where your start holes are, just all that information. If you did have your speeds in here, it would calculate those speeds as well. And then to save this, depending on your browser, some of the browsers you can right click and there's a print option in here. I believe in Google Chrome and Microsoft Edge, you have those. In Firefox, I just hit Control P and I bring up a print. And then a lot of times what I'll do is I'll save it to a PDF. So I'm not actually going to print this thing out. I'm going to save it as a PDF. So I can do that and then hit save. And then you save it. So there it is. Any questions that you guys are wanting to ask, or anything you've been running into, let me know. But that's pretty much it for today. That's about that's pretty much what I teach during online training for wires, because after you get it done and after you kind of figure it out, a lot of your toolpaths, they're not really going to change. Especially most of you guys doing wires are going to be doing a lot of very similar jobs. And so those similar jobs will, a lot of times copy and paste some toolpaths, and it works out pretty good. So there you go. I'm going to go ahead and pause for right now. If you do have any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. I'm going to hang out for a few minutes, answer any questions that do come up. And if you're leaving, have a good one. Thanks for joining us. Happy 4th of July. And then you guys have a great weekend, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. So thanks, guys. Have a good one. And like I said, I'm going to be here hanging out for a minute. So if you do have any questions, let me know.